Today we're going to be working on comparing decimals. When you have two decimals and you have to see which one is greater than, less than, or equal to the other. So let's take two decimals. Let's start with 0 and 3/10, and we're going to compare that to 0 and 3/100. Now, when you look at it, you see both are 3, but this has 2 more place values. So step number 1 would be to first draw an arrow down. We're going to first start with the whole number, because if the whole numbers are different, then you can stop right there and compare them. But since both of these are 0, I'm going to have to look next door. So the next thing I will have you do is draw a box around the decimals. Okay, so you notice this has 2 numbers in the decimal and this has 1. So what we're going to do is we are going to add another decimal place so that we're comparing the same amount of decimals. So now you see I have a 0, 3 inside the box, and I have a 3, 0 in the box. So I'm going to look at these numbers, and that's a 30, and this equals a 3. So which one is larger, 30 or 3? And if I look at it, then the answer is this one. 0 and 3/10 is larger than 0 and 3/100. Okay, let's try another one. Let's do 2 and 4/10, and we are going to compare it to 1 and 9/10. Now sometimes you look at it and say, well, 9 is bigger than 4, so this one has to be bigger. But again, we need to follow the steps. Step number 1, we're going to look at the whole numbers. This one is 2, this one is 1. They're different, so that's as far as I need to go. 2 is bigger than 1, so this is larger. Let's try another one. Let's try 4 and 56/100, and we're going to compare that to 4 and 6/10. Okay, step number 1, we're going to look at our whole numbers. They're both 4, so we're going to have to look at the decimal to see it's 4 and a little bit more, 4 and a little bit more, but which one has more? Okay, so step number 2 is going to be looking at the numbers past the decimal point. Now if you notice, this one has 2 place values passed, and this one has 1. So what we need to do is make them equal. And the way you do that is just by adding that 0. Now we can clearly see that this is 56, and this is 60, and 60 is larger than 56. So this one is the larger decimal. Okay? All right, let's take one more. Let's do 10 and 40/100, and we're going to compare it to 10 and 4/10. Okay, remember step number 1? Step number 1 is we're going to look at the whole numbers. Okay, they are equal. So we're going to have to go to step number 2. Step number 2 is looking at the decimals. I'm going to draw my box around it. I draw the box because it makes it easier to see this number. Okay, all right, so this has 2 place values, 4 and a 0. It's 40. This one has 1 place value. So we want it to match that this one has 2, so this one has 2. Okay, and if we look, we need to add that place value. We can just add a 0. So now I'm looking at 40 and 40, which makes these two mixed decimal and decimal numbers equal. So remember, step number 1 is to compare the whole numbers. Step number 2 is, if they are the same, looking at that decimal. Step number 3 is making sure that the place values match. If I have 2 on this side, I must have 2 on this side. If I have 1 on this side, I need to have 1 on this side. They should have the same amount of numbers. And if you need to add those place values, you just add zeros. Then, by looking in that box, you can compare those two numbers to see which one is greater than, less than, or equal to.